So, good morning and welcome to edition 7 of our At Leisure series. This episode, we're going to focus on the pub sector, and today we're very fortunate to be joined by two very experienced pub operators, along with a professional section hosted by Wollens Solicitors. My name is Michael Easton, and I look after the hotel and hospitality agency business for Vickery Holman across the region. We cover from Bristol and everything west. And as a firm, we deal with sales, acquisitions, undertake valuation and rating appraisals, professional building, landlord and tenant services, and basically all matters that involve viability and development. I'd like to thank you for joining us this morning, and I'd like to introduce our contributors, who you can see up on the screen. First up, we have Bruce and Leslie Brunning, who successfully run the Turtley Corn Mill and the bridge down at Mountbatten. Bruce and Leslie, if you could just give a little introduction to yourselves, if you don't mind.
We do this as a duo. Bruce and Leslie Brunning. Been here for 17 years at the Turtley Corn Mill. We've had the bridge at Mountbatten for 10 years. Prior to that, we had the ship in Nosmayo. So been around with the dinosaurs of the industry.
Yes.
Yes.
Indeed. And we had a little one called the Finny Gook over in Craft Hole.
Yeah, lovely pub. I remember when you were there.
Yeah.
We shouldn't talk about dinosaurs. I think there's a woolly mammoth just been found up down the road from you, isn't there?
Absolutely. Sherford. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
It wasn't one of us.
Thank you very much. I'd also like to introduce Ashley Bevans of Wollens Solicitors. Wollens based locally. Ashley, can you give us a bit of a précis of the firm and your role, if you would? You're on mute at the moment. Well, we've lost your sound, Ashley, I'm afraid. See if you can sort that out, and we'll come back to you. I'll just pop over to Will and Victoria. Will and Victoria of the Beer Engine, for those that know it, a great pub and brewery just outside of Exeter. Will, Victoria, tell us just a little soupçon about yourself this morning.
Good morning. I'm Will. This is my wife, Vicky, and we own and operate the Beer Engine, and we've been here. We are now coming into our 7th year here. We live on site, work on site, have a young family, and really just enjoy being owners of the oldest microbrewery in Devon. Lovely venue. Thank you. Seems like Ashley may be having a couple of technical difficulties, so hopefully we'll get those resolved before his bit. So I'm going to kick off with a market review. So if I can just ask you guys just to disappear for a second, and I'll bring you back in 5 minutes or so. So before we get to our guests, we'd like just to give a brief market update on the pub sector in the Southwest, which has shown itself to be largely resilient, actually, over the past couple of years. Sales have been steady, particularly for owner-operators, buoyed mostly by new entrants to the sector. This has been brought about by applicants who are looking to make life changes and move west. Funding is still very challenging and quite expensive. But because of the house price increases, we've seen much more equity being used and put into new business venues. A couple of recent successes for our team. We've dealt with the sale of the Britannia Inn, which is in central Truro, for those that know it, by the bus station. And just before Christmas, we dealt with the letting of the Hourglass, another institution, just off Exeter city centre, which we've let on a free of tie to Exeter Brewery. For some, though, this has sort of been odd, really, in so much as supply has outstripped demand, and there were others that probably felt that it would be the other way round. Operationally, the pub market in the Southwest has weathered the storm relatively well over the past 18 months compared to the rest of the UK. It's largely down to the quality of the existing operators, but also down to a peak in the staycation market. This, along with government-led support, has kept stock from coming to the market, but with support now being withdrawn and
and being reduced. And another hard lead up to Christmas, we do think there are some signs of hardship in the sector, particularly for those that fail to plan and adapt to changing times. Our outlook for the next 12 months is an increase in available sites, particularly in the last quarter of the year. As a practice, we undertake a considerable amount of valuation work, and we expect to see more owners looking at an exit rather than re-gearing debt for the medium term, although we do expect the better operators to continue to take advantage of their plans. And in a world where the customer is more demanding, the cream always does rise to the top. So that sort of covers off just a brief précis of our view on things. And with cream rising to the top, I'd like to, if I may, bring back Bruce and Leslie onto the screen. We don't practice this, by the way, so there's always a little bit of technical difficulty.
There you go.
Hi, guys.
Hello.
Hi. Morning.
Now, you guys are very strong in what you do. You've said, the venues that you've run, very well known for anyone, well beyond Devon. Could you perhaps share with us some of the changes you've looked at making over the last couple of years? And, some of them have been forced upon you. Some of them you probably would have been looking to do anyway. We're always looking and trying to change and improve our businesses. So good to understand some of the things that you've had to sort of react to and also push through over the last couple of years, if you don't mind kicking off with that.
So I think I'll start and then I'll let Bruce come in.
That's nice of you.
I think the thing is that nobody saw it coming. Everybody was very happily looking forward to their up and coming season, Easter. Always, you're dusting off the cobwebs from Christmas. And before we know where we are, we're all in the same situation, which is closed for hospitality. And I think there's not one person that wasn't in shock. I think we were very well supported by the government. Hospitality, I think, did very well. I think there's lots of other industries that could have had support. My hairdresser, for one, who the VAT is a big thing, which we're just about to come out of. But as a business, we were shell shocked. I think there's no other word for it. It's
Yeah, we were, but we were in the same boat as everybody else, as Leslie says. Everything closed down. I think that probably the most important thing to try and achieve, if you can, is firstly to maintain your standards as high as you can, despite the fact that pressure will be put on you to have lesser numbers of staff. Pressure will be put on you to compromise your opening hours. We think it's very important to remain, if you like, as normal as you possibly can, so that the customer never has to question your offering. You're going to be there regardless.
But I think we have found that staff-wise, when we've come out of this, and we are coming out of it now, the spring is in the air. Let's hope that 2022 is a great year. So if you forget the last 2 years, I think we're all finding now that we have to look at the staff that we've got and who has remained in the industry. Because a lot of people have moved off and done different things. And, somebody who was a chef has suddenly decided that he prefers to lay carpets and go home at 5 o'clock in the evening and not be still here at 11 o'clock at night. And I totally understand that. I think it's, but we also do have a lot of professional people, and you alluded to it in your opening statement, but hospitality is something that you're in it because you love it, because you're passionate about it, because you care for what you do and where you are in your surroundings. And I think that the people that will go forward in this are those people.
And you like the camaraderie of it.
Hospitality,
a lot of camaraderie in
there
hospitality.
is no other industry that is as wonderful as the one that we are in. No 2 days are the same. And I say this to every member of our staff. When we come to work, it's like going onto stage every single day. Every single day is different. Your audience will be different. Your show will be different. The food might not be the same, and somebody will complain about what you did yesterday was great and today isn't. That's what makes what we do fantastic. But you asked what we've done to change. We've tried to stay the same. I mean, we're not trying to be different. We are increasing our accommodation because accommodation is something that is needed in this area. But we're not doing it because of the situation we found ourselves in the last 2 years. We've been delayed for 2 years. So we're now continuing where we were 2 years ago. So we've just had a little pause on our pause button. Now it's time to start again. And I think that hospitality, for us, it's exciting going forward. We've got some challenges. Staff is a real key one. But apart from that, I think...
And if you can, I think keep investing. If you can keep investing in your business and you can demonstrate to those that are observing you that you're actually strong, you've got your foot on the throttle, maybe not to the floor, but you've got your foot on the throttle as opposed to having it on the brake. And I think that message gets out to people. People understand that. We've the bridge, you can see from the pictures we have up, mid crisis, if you want to call it, we spent a lot of money creating a brand new outdoor area to make people think to themselves, wow, that place is doing okay. We ought to really go and have a look at that, see what they've done. Now, we might not have been doing that well at the time.
I don't think we were.
No, I don't think we were doing that well at the time. But we felt that rather than put our foot on the brake and say, oh, God, shut the doors and put the lights off at 7, it was more appropriate to say, well, if we're going to get into trouble, we're going to get into trouble with our foot on the throttle, not the brake. Yeah. And I think that feeling, that sense is picked up by people.
Yeah, I think ultimately, the customer experience is exactly that, isn't it? How do I feel when I go into a venue? Do I feel as though it's been well looked after? Am I addressed properly by members of staff? Am I interested in the menu?
Yeah.
Are there various areas in which I can decide I would like to sit and eat inside, outside, soft, hard seats? All of these things are pertinent. And I suppose that starts from just as soon as they've turned up at the car park.
And I think, if you go into a place and say, well, we're not using that section at the moment, we're so quiet, so we've left the tables on the chairs or the chairs on the tables and we've put the lights off, it throws out a bad message. Yeah. So we've done everything that we possibly can, even when we're bloody nigh on empty, all the lights are on, the fires are going, the place feels as if it's alive.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's really tough to do that when you're feeling totally fed up with the fact that you haven't got the revenues that you want, you haven't got the punters out in the car parks that you want, and you're it would be justified to sit down and think to yourself, well, why the hell am I bothering to do this? It's not going to make any difference to today's revenue if I light the fire.
Yeah.
No, it might not, but it might make a difference to tomorrow's.
I guess a lot of it, we talk in the industry a lot of goodwill. So, you guys are, long time at the 2 venues now, 17 and 10 years respectively. So you've already got, I guess, from that, a very loyal customer base that believes in what you're delivering. So I suppose that's the bit that probably keeps you going, and then just trying to tweak around the edges too.
And they expect us to be here, Michael. They expect to wake up on a Tuesday morning and think, oh, we'll go somewhere for lunch. It has to be here. Even if they're the only ones doing it, we have to be here ready for them. If they turn up and we say, oh, no, we're not trading on a Tuesday lunchtime now. The next time they want to come out, they're saying, oh, you sure you want to go to Turtley, darling? I'm not sure if it was open. It wasn't open last time we went there. We did it once at the Ship, long time ago. We shut the Ship on a Monday because the trading was lousy. And it was a big mistake. It was not the right thing to do. Sent out a bad message.
I suppose if you think in isolation of the venues that you've had, Nosmay is quite a small, village, probably quite a lot of holiday homes down there. So not a huge populace. So I suppose that for you guys, it's you are destination, aren't you? It is people getting in the car and coming out.
The ship was definitely destination. You know, no two people would meet there really, because you're both coming from the same direction and actually met on the road about 5 miles ago. So the ship was not really a meet-up location.
Whereas here Turtley is.
Turtley is, of course, because it's got the A38 running down the side of it, so it's a very central point. The bridge isn't, to be fair. You know, the bridge is not really somewhere where you'd say, well, I'll tell you what, I'll meet you at lunch from the bridge if one person lives in Ivy Bridge and the other in Plymouth.
Yeah.
Therefore, the characteristics, the trading characteristics and the marketing characteristics of the bridge are very different to those of Turtley.
Okay, thank you. You touched on staff during that. Now, you know, it's widely reported, isn't it, that there was, you know, sort of an exodus of staff because, you know, we've had such uncertain times, particularly, you know, from a kitchen point of view.
Yeah,
it's been talked about for much longer than the pandemic that we've gone through, hasn't it, as to how people view working in the industry.
Yeah.
How have you got on with the staff that you had, and have you made any changes to terms and conditions to try and attract and train and keep, you know, all of these things that are just trying to, I suppose, stabilize your day-to-day running? Have you would have given thought to that, I'm sure. Is there anything that you would share on that point?
So I think we've been around a long time, and with that comes some very loyal staff, and they've stayed with us. I think the furlough scheme was a masterpiece. If we hadn't have had furlough, of course, we'd have lost all of our staff. I think furlough went on too long, if I'm honest. I think that I lose track of my months, but when hospitality came back on full time, I think there was an element of people within the hospitality industry that decided to see out the summer on furlough. And that, of course, caused hospitality industries a lot of problems because there was then a shortage. And people, and I know for a fact, people were paying ridiculous amounts of money to be able to run their kitchens or to run their front of house, which is a great shame because it attracted the wrong people and it gave you a temporary fix. And then people were muddled up. They were in the wrong places doing the wrong things. And as we all know, in hospitality, especially in the Southwest, in the summer, when nobody can leave the country, where are they all going to go? They're going to head to the Southwest. So we are completely and utterly, you go from doing nothing with a team that has done nothing to going, it's like getting onto a motorway on a bike. Suddenly you've got to do 150 miles an hour and you're not able to do it. We kept our staff were brilliant. We lost a few. And I said about a chef who became a carpet fitter, and he is a carpet fitter. It makes me quite sad to think of him as a carpet fitter because he was a very good chef. But he goes home.
But we've also had people that have left the inconvenient and uncomfortable hours that we operate, that the hospitality industry operates, and they've shot off into something that starts at 9 o'clock on a Monday and finishes at 5 o'clock on a Friday, and have discovered that actually that kind of work doesn't suit everybody. You know, that's very mundane work. You know, you get stuck in the traffic in the morning and you get stuck in the traffic in the evening, and you do it 5 days a week, and you don't have the camaraderie, you don't have your mates knocking around, you're not working late at night when it gets dark and having a couple of beers at the end of your session.
But your wife likes you being home for tea at 5:30.
Yeah, well, that's what Michael does. That's what he does.
But I think the thing is staff-wise, we've been very lucky. I would say our most difficult area for staff is we rely a lot on casual staff. So our young ones are really important to us. They'll start, we take a lot, in this one, we take a lot from Ivy Bridge Community College because we have a network of young ones. And they'll start off in the kitchen as kitchen porters. When they're strong enough, we'll bring them forward and they'll work with us front of house. And we've sort of lost 2 years. We've lost a 2-year transitional growth of our young ones. So we're seeing lots of young ones applying for a job, and they're no longer young because they're now 18 and 19. but they've never worked before, and they're very green. We're having to really start right at the very beginning with them. So for us, our biggest area of our problem is our front of house staff, our managers, our long-term ones, are having to work really hard at not only managing the business, but keeping an eye on these young ones that are running around, maybe just changing the style slightly. We're doing, whoa, why are you doing that? Bring it back online again.
Yeah.
But that will change. We need a good year, and we'll get through that. Of course, uni students, we work a lot with uni students who will always come back to us. Uni students were not in a good place. They were holed up somewhere. Then they came back to their parents, and they didn't go back out into the workplace. So last summer was quite difficult front of house for us, more than it was back of house. And I think probably this year will be a bit of the same. But I think if you look at us all in 2 years' time, when hopefully we'll all be more settled, then we'll start to get the normal ball rolling again, and we'll all be in a happier place.
Yeah. The point that got me there, which is quite interesting, is probably the numbers of people that have come out of the trade but actually maybe would consider coming back.
Yeah.
And you mentioned the 9 to 5, Bruce, and you said, yeah, that's what I do. And it's funny because good operators.
Just taking the opportunity to have a shot at you, Mike.
I think it's absolutely right, and I'm going to respond to that accordingly.
Good.
I think that the good operators are people. They enjoy the adrenaline of providing something good and maintaining that, and it is a vocation. Yes, it earns you money and all of those wonderful things, but ultimately it's a job that doesn't ever really truly go away. And I think probably, the guys that have sort of gone out into other industries thinking coming back, it's probably just those same things that they miss. It's actually working in a team of people to a mutual end of something that is enjoyable. It is it's
fantastic.
I think you're absolutely right, Mike. And I think this argument that people have is, with furlough and so on, all the people that worked in hospitality discovered that there was another world out there that was from 9 until 5 o'clock. They did. They went out and checked it out. I'll put money that a whole load of those, particularly the ones whose souls are fed by making others happy, which is what our industry is at its core is about, will come back to it. They will come back to it, and they'll want to do it again. Because
you see that coming full circle.
It's a lot more fun to be working at the bridge during the day than it is in an accountant's office.
Unless you're an accountant. Unless
you're an accountant, of course, and then it must be marvellous.
It's the same with solicitors, and hopefully we'll get to talk to one of those in
oh God, what bloody solicitors? Yeah, I know exactly what you mean, Mike.
I think from my point of view, I'm lucky, very lucky actually, that in my general sort of 9 to 5 job, I actually get to speak to people that are involved in your industry, and I get that hosting side of things, and I get to go home for my tea at 6:30, and then enjoy it from the other side on a Friday or a Saturday. One final thing I just wanted to ask you before we wrap up. There has been a lot about rising costs and across the board, and we're sort of coming out of government-led supports, and there is a focus on what more can be done to actually help the industry generally, because you are facing those challenges have always been there, but it seems as though they are accelerating, and there's a lot of talk about what can be done after all the help that has been given. It doesn't just suddenly go away and everything's absolutely fine. It's still very, very challenging out there. Is there anything that strikes you as would be helpful in the future? VAT is obviously a big one. We talk about rates.
VAT obviously is a good one. I'm not sure that I'm entirely comfortable with the idea that hospitality and the leisure industry is so different to everybody else that it ought to get a VAT advantage. It doesn't. I mean, during the period of crisis, well, yes, it was a great vehicle to use that the government could use easily to support us. But whether or not it's something that the hospitality industry can demand in the future, I'm not sure is entirely fair. It would be lovely, but I don't think it's fair. Rating, I think, is most certainly one that could be helped. If you could stop the rating system being a tax on success, which it clearly is at the moment, I think that would be very fair. And that has a bottom line impact. If you can save 20 grand in your rates, that's 20 grand's worth of profit on the bottom of your P&L. Takes a bloody long time to earn 20 grand down to your bottom of your P&L. Takes months for some at some periods in the year. So I think that would be an enormous help. Making it easy to employ people, not taxing employment, I think would be a help. But I think at the end of the day, Mike, you have to accept the fact that we're an industry like any other industry. We operate essentially on a level playing field. We've got to put our backs into it, and we've got to become the best in our particular area or our particular section, and make our way that way. I don't think you can imagine that your success in the future is going to be a product of external support. That's not a practical thing to think.
Yeah, that's a fair comment. Thank you. I'm going to leave it there. We may well have some question and answers. In fact, I can see on the chat, which I mistakenly forgot to advise those that have called in this morning. We do have the chat function. So if you do have any questions for Bruce and Leslie and also for Ashley and Victoria, who will follow now, please put them in the chat function. We will come back to you at the end, but thank you both now. Appreciate that. That was good. Ashley, let's see if we can get you going, both on the camera and on the audio. How are you getting on? There's nothing quite like being live. Okay, we're off mute. Oh, the excitement. I think we may just struggle with Ashley. Ashley, can I just advise that you just keep, if you dial back in and do try and do hop up on screen as and when, but maybe if you want to try that, and we'll just drop you for a second. And if I can ask for Will and Vicky to come back on in the meantime. We're almost there. Hello.
Hello.
Hiya.
Thank you for jumping in. The wonders of being live. So I'm sure Ashley will keep trying. So, guys, thank you for joining us again. And I'm sure you probably found it as interesting hearing from Bruce and Leslie and what they've been through. There'll be some similarities and some differences, I'm sure. I'm conscious that you've been 7 years at the Beer Engine, the classic 7-year itch. I haven't noticed that from you. From my own personal experience, you took on quite an institution anyway. You've taken your time to actually get it to the way that you want it. And probably the majority of your changes have probably been in the last couple of years with a few more things being launched now and a few more things to follow. Is that a fair...
I think the 7-year itch, having had a year and a half, 2 years holiday, the 7-year itch might come in 2 years' time. But I think the holiday certainly was a good respite. It gave us the opportunity to take a long, hard look at not just ourselves, but everything that we had been doing and where we wanted it to go.
Yeah, I mean, tell us what you did, because from memory, you took a bit of time out. You recouped, you waited really just to see what the future was going to give, rather than jump in and, a lot of people spend a lot of money quite quickly with grants that were coming through and whatnot. You guys were a bit more circumspect, but can you just share with those that are watching this morning, just some of the things you actually have done in the last sort of 6-12 months?
The first thing we did was we got to know each other as a family again. We got two young children, and we spent a little bit of time as a family and enjoying our pub as a big home rather than a business. And then we had to start looking at takeaways and supporting our local village. Being a brewery as well, people missed our beer. So we were able to be that lifeline.
And we were lucky enough to be able to do it. We were allowed to keep trading. during the lockdown one, if we will, for a better phrase. Whereas lots of people couldn't do that. We were at more of an advantage, which I suppose it's not our fault, but we tried to make the most of it. And all the grants that were available, we banked everything and sort of did what Mr. Sunak said, and keep it until you need it, and then make sure that you invest it to come out of the other side. And we definitely, as you said, we were patient and we had a great time. And we felt when the time was right, as we entered lockdown 2, the really grim one.
Yeah, it was January, not nice.
So we had the November month closure, which did absolutely nothing, the circuit breaker. And then we got into December, and we canned it before Christmas, didn't we? I think we got to the 19th of December and we went, this is just, you've got to eat a Scotch egg outside in, groups of 2 with different coloured hats on to prove that I don't know what it was. So then we canned it until May.
Give or take.
Yeah.
And that's when we made all of the major changes. It's almost like we woke up one morning and it was a new day and a new dawn, and we were ready to invest the money that we had been sitting on. We knew that we didn't need it for survival anymore, and that there was an end in sight, and that we could make the changes. So
you created a huge...
We created an outdoor stretch tent area, excuse the cat, and it's beautiful. I don't think we expected it to be as fantastic as it is.
Yeah, so we saw Vicky was looking through
Everyone seen hear me?
The BII magazine or something. And there was an article about a pub that had a stretch tent that they'd put up in their garden, and you'd seen one at another pub garden. So we just did some research into it, made the call, and the company were based in Wimbledon and now have offices in the southwest. Down they came and just told us what we needed to do, and we sort of went for it, and builders came in. Weirdly enough, it was exactly a year ago today, the 8th of February, we started works on the outside, which then took 3 months, 2 or 3 months to finish.
Felt like a very long time.
Yeah, and we did work internally to the pub, not only structurally, but creating new retail space for us down there, another bar, another avenue. And so far, touch wood, the decisions have been fantastic, because last year when we came out of lockdown 2 and you could only be outside and it was table service only, it was quite wet to begin with, but that was fine because we've just put up 137 square metre tent canopy in our car park. So that enabled us to trade, and now we're seeing the fruits from the downstairs bar with the Six Nations rugby tournament on. We had a record number of people in there on Saturday. And, we're in mid-Devon, and it's tough to get message around people in mid-Devon. There are a lot of customers of ours don't understand what the internet is, and it's word of mouth, and it takes time to build up what we've done. And going into year 2 of the outdoor space, it'll go mad.
I think the interesting thing is that during lockdown 1, when we were all closed down and it wasn't doom and gloom, we were thinking of future. We thought, maybe we need to rein it in a little bit and not. We'd become a bit of a rolling ball and got busier and busier, which was fabulous, but it wasn't exactly where we wanted to be. And so when in lockdown 1, we decided that we'd try and slow it down a little bit and rein it in and bring it back to how we wanted it. Interestingly enough, by the end of lockdown 3, we doubled our capacity and we're rolling that ball again.
But we're doing it with less staff, and we're doing it with, we echo a lot of what Bruce and Leslie said in their piece. It's all of the points that they made, we're nodding along to, sort of thinking, well, blimey, it's exactly what we would have said. The only contrary to that is that we have looked at the trading week and gone, no, we're not opening on that time. And we're looking at the wage bill and the number of personnel we need to do that offering and thinking it's actually not worth it. We're better off getting us rammed and packed to the gills at the certain time of the week where we've got the majority of our staff, and the rest of the time we skeleton it and scale down. And people
become a bit more wet-led as well.
Yeah, realise that we are a pub. We do sell pints. You know, we got a lot of blokes and women who want drink after work and will come in, you know, straight away for a few beers. And it's not necessarily all about the meals. You know, we don't have to chase the meals all the time. The meals will sell themselves at the weekend, but we've got to realise that we need some time as well. You know, we do have a young family, and it's important that we get it, because we're only going to be young once. And we feel confident enough that the reputation we've built up here and the trust that we have in our community, quite a wide community, people will say, fair enough. And they'll just have to, for want of a better phrase, like it or lump it, basically. And we're decided that this is what we're going to do, and people will follow us. Some people won't, but that's their decision, not ours. You know, we are the fourth emergency service. You know, the phone does ring before 8 o'clock in the morning
for table reservations.
Table reservations and what are our gluten-free options on Christmas Day. But
in January.
But that's part of it, you know, and that's why we love it, because you get to all the stories of customers which are just unrivaled. You know, no one is as fascinating as a customer. But yeah, we feel we've got a grip of our business now.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, you've got, I suppose, still a very traditional 4 o'clock club that comes, you know, your local trade, and that's from, you know, the lord of the manor, literally, to you know, the guy that you know would be the first on the food chain from an employment point of view, and everyone in between. But I suppose, yeah, the beer engine has sort of grown its reputation on food over the years. It's interesting that you've increased your number of covers, which must have put a bit of, you know, strain on the kitchen and staffing and what have you. But then at the same time, you've sort of also increased the ability for it just to be a traditional wet pub with the brewery tap.
I think we shuffled around the kitchen. You know, I keep forgetting about all the things that we did back of house, the things that the customers don't see. But, you know, we did a complete kitchen reshuffle, which enabled us to have a third cooking station, which last year it handled the influx very well. We'll see what it does this year, and I'm sure it'll be equally successful. As long as no machinery breaks down, we're all good.
And it's operating, isn't it? This is where, you know, Vicky's skills of operating and menu development and what are we going to feed them, and it's keeping records and being conscientious and involved allows us to know what we're going to sell in the summer. And then it takes someone like Vicky to be able to go, right, this is how we're going to knock it out. This is how we're going to expedite all of this. And we've got the guys in the kitchen who are long in the tooth, but still have the passion for it. I mean, they're not going to come up with it themselves. They need to be micromanaged and almost spoon-fed, but they're brilliant for it. So therefore, if we can come up with the ideas, we can execute it. And because we want to do it, you know, we want to work. I want to carry trays of food up and down
a lot of
ramp to the garden.
Well,
I want to do 15 miles on a Saturday.
I'd prefer to be working sometimes than parenting, to be honest. I'd much prefer to hand my children to somebody else and actually put the chef whites back on and get back in the kitchen, but nobody wants my children.
I don't blame them.
How have you found staffing over this? You know, a lot of changes, a lot of different demands. You know, it hasn't been easy. It was interesting what Bruce and Leslie were saying earlier, just as to perhaps that some that had come out and maybe are thinking of coming back in, but also probably some of the youngsters coming up and through. That seems to be what a few people are talking about. It's not that easy to sort of encourage new people in. Is that your experience?
I think we've been very lucky with those that have stuck by us and stayed with us. We did lose a couple. One, he didn't become a carpet fitter. He became a delivery man for supermarkets, and he loves it. He'd never, ever go back into the kitchen. And we're very sad to see him leave. But, you know, it's life. And I know that he likes his 9 to 5 and being home for dinner and whatever he does in the evenings.
Yeah, not working.
Yeah. But I think we've been very lucky with our staff, and everybody's stepped up. Yeah.
They're put under more pressure now.
And the youngsters are greener. You know, just to copy exactly what Leslie said, it's they've lost 2 years of their lives and social skills, and there's an awful lot of stop looking at your feet, look at the eyes, and be brave,
say
talk
words. You've got a voice, but they seem to be getting greener and greener. Maybe it's because we're getting older and gnarlier, I don't know.
No need for that.
But it's the fact that every time you take on a youngster, every year, they just seem like they're a little bit behind what the previous one was. Whether that's, I don't know if there's anything in it, but as Vicky said, we've got some great youngsters. We've got students we've got a crop at the moment who are all graduating this year.
It's terrible. They're leaving us.
They're leaving. But I'm hoping that they take ages to get postgraduate jobs and they can stay with us for a bit longer. That's the plan. And
references.
Yeah, we filtered out some people who necessarily may have been holding us back, which the lockdowns enabled us to do that, which was quite good. But yeah, staff-wise, they don't walk into us here.
Anybody that does walk in never walks out again, though.
Yeah,
they love
get hired, yeah. But
they're given an apron.
It's kids. We have to do everything with kids.
Yeah, trying to bring them up through.
And once they've got it, they're great. I mean, I find it harder and harder to have the patience with them. But then occasionally, like one we've got, she was 13 when she started with us, turning into 14. She now drives herself to work.
Takes her dad home when he's finished drinking, and goes out on the staff do's with them, and she's off to university next year. So that you sort of look at it and think, wow, that's great. Success story there.
Yeah, really nice ones.
Yeah, good. Good.
Staff-wise here, it's kids, and that's it really. We just have to do it all ourselves.
Thank you. I'm just more because I'm conscious of time, so I'm only just going to ask one last question, and then hopefully, if we've got enough time, Q&A at the end again. One thing we haven't probably touched on before is just the customers. Have you noticed any particular changes in customers? We talk about
1 second. We just got someone turn up at the door.
Obviously, the deliveries.
It's going to happen. Yeah. We talk about value for money, and that isn't about budget. That's about people feeling that what they pay for is worth it in the round. Have you seen any sort of change in customer expectations, demands, that sort of thing? Or
I think that we're so well supported, and people, especially our customers, our local, true to the core customers, they've seen what we've gone through, and they've seen the changes that we've made and the effort that we've put in to always try and accommodate them. That they've rolled with it. When the pint of ale goes up 10p, they notice it. You normally get an eyebrow raise, but they get it. We're seeing, I think January, certainly just looking at this year, January, we were a little bit concerned. January's never your best month. But we didn't realize until this weekend how many people were on a diet and doing dry January. Just one weekend into February, and we're hoping that it's showing us the trajectory of what is going to happen for, the rest of the year. Because if it can, then brilliant. I think price, everybody knows that, everything's going up, and we're trying to take our time and do it slowly, and it not be such a massive shock to the pocket. Because as you said, we have, from Lord of the Manor to everybody, we're still a pub.
And he'll moan the worst. They've got stacks of cash round here, stacks of it, and you put a pint up 10p.
Well, you get an eyebrow raise from some, but
yeah.
But I think that there's post furlough, there's quite a lot of money that hasn't been spent and is for leisure, and people, they are going out.
Yeah.
They're spending money, and because everything's going up, as long as we can stay reasonable enough and hopefully get the customer in, 3-4 nights a week, and not price ourselves out that we're only getting them once a week or once every 2 weeks, then, it works on a volume.
Yeah. And we're lucky because people go to Exeter and they'll go to the high street and they'll come here, and there is a change, and people will go, oh, wow, that represents good value. So they can come here, have a good drink, share a cab home, and it's still cheaper than going to the pub in Exeter. But then you go the other way to Crediton, the next town, we are massively more expensive than Crediton. So it's as Ricky says, balancing it.
Thank you, guys. We're at 1:45, so I'm just going to just cut that there for a second. We're going to have one last go with Ashley, see if we can get it in. Poor old Ashley. But hopefully catch up with you in a second, if that's okay. Right, Ashley, one more go. Right, we have picture. We have sound. Absolutely.
Brilliant.
You're on. I'm going to disappear. I'm glad that you kept going. So I'll come off and catch you in a moment.
Right. Thanks, Mike. And apologies, everyone. I would love to say we've saved the best for last. Hopefully in the next 7-10 minutes, you can leave your feedback on the chat and see where we go. Just very briefly, yes, my name's Ashley Bevans. I am a partner in the commercial property team at Wollens. I work principally out of our South Devon office. I've worked around the South Devon area for 11 years. Previously, I have worked in London and Birmingham and Exeter. Property is quite a broad church. I have a particular specialism and interest in the hospitality and leisure sector. I'm a frustrated master chef wannabe. So in my spare time between work and other things, I love to just be in the kitchen and unwind. But enough about me and about why I've been kindly asked by Mike and Vickery Holman to come on today. I don't want to be overly preachy or give you a legal seminar on things. I just want to pick up on something that Mike talked about in his market review. And that was all about planning and how important it will be for businesses within our sector to effectively plan for the next 12 months and beyond if they're going to remain stable and be successful. And part of the planning can involve the legal side as well. If you're looking, particularly to expand, to take on some new premises, or heaven forbid, you've just decided this is not for me and I want to cash out, which hopefully no one here falls into that camp. So I said to Mike, well, I will do something called a Property DIY SOS. I'm not Nick Knowles. I'm far more handsome. But I thought I would just spend a little bit of time today giving some pointers and some things to think about in advance before you make that decision to either commit to a purchase or indeed to look to sell. So why bother? Hopefully in the next 5 minutes, with points that I will talk about, I may well give you the answer as to why bother. And by that, what I mean is, why should I engage a solicitor or indeed any lawyer to have a look at things in advance before I've got a committed buyer or before I say to an agent that I'm interested in committing to this? So let's see if we can work out the answer together. One of the main things that people need to have in order is something that's called title. And I'm sure we're all kind of familiar with what that may be, but basically it's all to do with proof of ownership. Now, you will be surprised at how much land can still be unregistered. There's last records I looked at, there was still 35% of land in this country that isn't registered. Equally, you will be surprised that this area that you've used to park your car on or to use as storage over the years that you've been there, you may not actually own and may be unregistered or indeed could be owned by someone else. So the more that we have an investigation prior to committing particularly to any sale and to say, do we own all of these parcels of land? We have a look at the title. Are there any erroneous entries that are on there? It may be that you own the freehold to somewhere and you have been letting that out to a third party to use, and that lease has come to an end. Is that lease still shown on your freehold title at land registry? It could be a devil to try and get rid of. That's one type of erroneous entry. Another may be what I've called penny mortgages. Particularly some of the larger banks, historically, they've always taken the view that security is good, and that if a customer needed further banking facilities, if they've got security to offer, that can help, whether it's increasing an overdraft or further advance on a mortgage. You will be surprised how many mortgages are still left on people's premises, even though when I speak to clients, they say, well, I paid that off years ago. So it can help tease that out as well and prevent some kind of heart attacks. And also, just on a title point, it enables us just to have a look to make sure there are all necessary rights and easements that you need to come and go from a property or to use and operate it. All these points apply very much just as much as if you're buying as if you are looking to sell. Statutory assessments, I won't spend very long on this. You've got a shopping list here of things that any purchaser would expect to see, particularly with electrical test certificates now. They'd always been somewhat of a grey area as to whether or not you needed them. Particularly with residential now, they are cropping up as being mandatory to have a 5-year certificate. And it's something any prospective purchaser on commercial premises would expect to see. Asbestos assessments, again, even if you moved into new premises that were constructed over the last 20 years, the way the legislation is drafted, it still technically needs some form of written assessment. And that's a bit of a misconception that a lot of people I deal with come across to say, well, it wasn't built at the time that asbestos was widely used. The other point here, planning and building regulations. Have you copies of all your planning and building regulation consents and approvals for works that you've done to the property? Even if they are historical, you may find that you still need to have evidence of them, as some lenders will insist upon having a particularly if the works are fairly recent and you can get indemnity insurance. So that's what I'm really going to mention on that. We talked a bit about title. For those of you that are on leases or would be looking to commit to leasehold premises, again, is everything registered? What I find quite often, particularly with tenants who take on pubs, is that if they're dealing with an institutional landlord such as Punch, the tenant may not actually engage a solicitor at all at the time that they go in. That's absolutely fine until you then come to sell, and a lawyer like me has a look and we discover that the lease hasn't actually been registered, and coupled with that, no stamp duty land tax has been paid. So really important just to make sure everything is all as it should be. If you're exiting premises or you're taking on premises where there's already a current tenant and they are looking to leave, what state and condition are the premises going to be in? Leases are always very specific, not just on the type of repair that you've got to keep them in during the actual lease term, but also what they should look like when you hand them back. That's what we call yield-up clauses. There's a bit of self-help that comes here. Liquor paint, make sure everywhere's clean and tidy. Some landlords, will want to itemise every screw and nail. So the more that they're looking nice and attractive, the better, really, with that. If there are any breaches, particularly on any repairs or any arrears, really important is to try and get those up to speed ASAP. Particularly as from the 24th of March, the moratorium on landlords being able to take action against commercial tenants for rent arrears comes to an end. That was something that was imposed during COVID. It was released for residential towards the end of last year, but they've still kept it in place for commercial, just really to help commercial tenants. The other vital thing is that just because you've got a lease doesn't automatically entitle you to be able to sell it. There will be a clause in there that will deal with what consents or permissions may be needed from a landlord or indeed any other third party for you to be able to sell. So whenever I get people come into the office and they're looking to buy or sell something that's leasehold, one of the first things that I will do is to have a look at these alienation provisions just to see that they actually can do it. In some cases, there's an absolute prohibition, in which case, unless the landlord agrees, you're not going to be able to sell. So important to look at that, as well as what the requirements would be from a landlord in order to sell or take on a lease. We are seeing far more at the moment demands for both rent deposits and a third-party guarantor, mainly because landlords are still very nervy about tenant covenant strength and how well they may be able to comply with their lease obligations. Those kind of requirements have to be reasonable, they're imposed, but the sooner those points are raised, particularly if you see somewhere you want to buy or you've got a buyer engaged, the better. So if there's going to be any awkwardness or hold-ups on landlord consent side, rather tease them out as soon as possible. Licensing, I'm not going to preach to all of you because you're well aware of licensing requirements. It's just something to think about particularly for those that may well be in a distressed state. So let's just say you're looking to purchase a pub that hasn't been trading for some time because of COVID. You'll be surprised how many publicans have suspended paying the license fee, which ultimately could lead to the whole license being revoked with no guarantee from the licensing authority that it will actually come back if any new application is made. And also just to make sure that you've got the correct people on the public register as to who the DPS is and to who the premises license holder is. Employees. We've talked a lot today about employees and recruitment, and the main theme, which I fully understand for all of you in the hospitality and the leisure sector, is that a lot of your employees may be temporary. They may well be, what we call seasonal workers. And whenever I deal with, business transfer arrangements, quite often I have, certainly vendor clients say to me, when I ask about employees, they're not employees, we've just got some seasonal staff or they're casual labour. As I've kind of just put down here on the slide, the definition nowadays as to who is an employee is much broader and much wider than it used to be. So I always take the approach, if you've got someone on your payroll, whether that's cash in hand or who you do, normal bank transfers to, they're taking a salary, they will most likely be an employee. So we need to think about them and to make sure everything relating to all employees is up to date. Now, whilst you don't have to have written contracts of employment for each employee, it is highly advisable that you do, because you do have to give each employee at least a written statement of particulars, such as what their working hours are going to be, rates of pay, who the employer is, their job descriptions, so on and so forth. And by the time you've done that, you may as well give them a written contract of employment. If they don't have anything at all in writing as to what their responsibilities are, not even the particulars, you could find an employment tribunal matter raised that said, at the very least, you will have purchasers saying that they want the position formalised and they want written contracts of employment for the employees for them to take on. And on the taking on point, I've just mentioned TUPE. I'm sure a lot of you are aware of this. If you're looking to buy and sell a business as a going concern, a seller has to sell and a buyer has to take on all of the employees of that business, apart from some very, very limited exceptions. The major one being that actually, an employee decides they don't want to work for the new owners, and so they refuse to GP transfer, which effectively means that they resign come the end of the transaction when you complete. I've just put a couple of bullet points here for other useful things to think about. Get your crack team of commandos ready. So other people who you may need to make this happen, Mike and Vickery Holman, for argument's sake, if you're thinking of selling or if you're thinking of acquiring somewhere, do have a very good agent in the form of Mike there. Accountants. Most of you probably do have accountants. I know some people do their own bookkeeping. That's absolutely fine. When it comes to things such as apportionments of sale prices between your business assets, your goodwill, your inventory, any stocks, how that split takes place can have important tax implications. And if you're buying, certainly, if it's a freehold, it's stamp duty, land tax to think about. So just how that price is apportioned between the various assets, important to have an accountant on board there. And your bank relationship managers. I'm sure we would all say that the days of old for the old bank managers where you knew them by name and could go in and have a cup of tea and any loan would be sorted out come the afternoon have been and gone. But there are some very, very good relationship managers still out there, and let them know as soon as possible your plans. If you're thinking of selling, if you're thinking of buying, just so that they are there ready to spring into action as soon as possible. We are still finding that timescales on my side anyway in dealing with banks and getting instruction papers is still not at pre-pandemic levels. It's definitely improved, but the sooner they're on board, better. I've mentioned here any related transaction. Again, reason being is that if you're thinking of downsizing or you're wanting to get out of the industry at all, which again, as I said, I hope no one's wanting to, but if you are looking to buy a house, very type of different transaction there. I often use the analogy of trying to link a business with a residential transaction, like asking a giraffe to make a crocodile. They're very different. They move at different speeds, and so sooner the lawyer knows that and how they can manage that, the better. Front load everything as soon as possible. We in my commercial industry, we often use CPSC inquiries. And they sound rather grand, but they touch upon pretty much a lot of the points that we've mentioned through these slides. And they can take a bit of time to deal with, and they can be a bit detailed. So the sooner that process has started, even before anyone is admitted to buy or sell, the better. It enables me as a solicitor to do as full a contract pack as possible, whether I'm sending that out or I'm receiving one. And also it means that agents such as Mike, if they're trying to tie up time-sensitive deals, say a 28-day exchange window, they can be quite forceful with that if they know that all our ducks are in a row. Which comes back to the last point really on this side, be realistic on timescales. Business transactions do take time. That delays can happen, but the sooner you can tease out anything that may well be a chink in armour and we can get it dealt with, the better really. So, my last slide, why bother? I hope that I've given you some things to think about. This is not a pitch to say, come and see me, but I do think it is really important that if you are, for example, looking to make a decision to sell or acquire some new premises, the sooner you consider these points before any deal is tied together, it will lead to a better and smoother and quicker transaction. And you don't need to spend a lot of money for a solicitor to have an initial look at these things for you. They certainly shouldn't be charging you a lot of money to have a think about these things. And I'm always more than willing to have a quick look over some title papers, etc., to make sure that they're all in order. And if we've got to get any papers from any third parties, that that process can happen as well. Maybe over form solicitors, and maybe deeds still with the bank. You can start the ball rolling as well. Just as a final kind of close off, really, I've kind of just said here, be proactive, not reactive. That's very much the main theme I want you to take from this today. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Ashley. I've jumped on for no better reason than it has turned 11 o'clock, which is quite a pivotal time in most pubs around the UK. So I'm conscious of time for everyone that's joined the call this morning. Ashley, can you just pop your microphone back on and perhaps just give out your email address so that if anybody who's watching either now or when this goes onto our YouTube channel can maybe drop you a note directly? Could you just give that out?
Yes, of course. Yeah, I'll put that on the chat as well. But it's Ashley, ASHLEY .Bevans, BEVANS and then Wollens, WOLLENS.co.uk.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. As I say, I am conscious of time. We have overrun. There was lots to talk about. There were a couple of questions in the chat. Could I just ask Will and Victoria just to pop back on for a second? I just want to run through one of those with you and then just get some thoughts from Bruce and Leslie before we draw matters to a close. If you guys are still with us, that would be great. I was just thinking it's Tuesday, isn't it? So you haven't got any customers quite yet. So the question I just wanted to ask you, because it's sort of pertinent to some of the things we touched on earlier. It's a question from Louise. Basically, unfortunately, certain roles in the hospitality sector are not as valued as they should be, and certainly not as they are in other countries. How do you think the hospitality industry can attract staff for a long-term career? I mean, I'm just going to start it because actually I've tended to find that the good staff member invariably becomes the sort of the good manager, and then depending on how much money they've got available, becomes the good tenant, becomes the good lessee, becomes the good owner. I mean, that is the dream, if you like, of what people do. But some people actually don't want to run their own business. It's more skills than they've got when they're focused on one particular role. But I don't know what your thoughts maybe are on that question generally.
I'd say the most important thing is they've got to want to do it. If you're looking at it as a long-term career and you're not fussed by what you're doing if it's just a job, I wouldn't do it or advise anyone to do it, because the hospitality industry won't be able to attract you, because there are so many different things, antisocial hours, money's not great. You're not in this to be rich. And if you're just getting a job, I wouldn't say work in hospitality. You've got to want to do it. It's got to be your character, I believe, your nature to serve and enjoy it, and be at the right place where you can have fun and grow as a person. I
think the camaraderie, the pints after work, all of that, it's part and parcel of it. And it will never be the best paid industry in the world. And you really have to have so much love to do it. That, for me, even when I was an employee before, owning the beer engine, I almost did it for practically nothing because I adored it. It wasn't like going to work. It was waking up and just, it was brilliant. It's life. Yeah. And ultimately that's why it ends up being better to own your own, because if you're doing it for somebody else and loving it, you're, going to love it just as much for yourself. And I think as an owner, I hope that anybody that works for us gets that from us, sort of that good feeling, and loving what we do. And I think that, anybody that is with us does love what they do.
And they're the right person, they have the character for it.
But obviously pay rises and 4-day weeks and holidays honoured and days off honoured, and all of those things, the perks of the industry. Just try and make it a little bit more real life, rather than the 100 hours that chefs used to have to work.
Okay, thank you. Can I just ask Bruce and Leslie back as well, just to get your take on that, and then I think we'll wrap matters up. We've kept people away from their normal lives probably long enough. So if Bruce and Leslie, if you're still there and able to jump on screen, that'd be lovely. Oh, the anticipation.
There we are.
Hi. Yeah, I don't know what your take on that, allied to what's been said.
Well, not dissimilar, I have to say, although I do genuinely believe that employees in hospitality have to be paid properly. I don't think you can get away with the old days of paying them as little as you can and supporting them with tips. I think they have to earn the right amount of money now, comparable to what they can get at Tesco's or what they can get in town. And I think the problem with that is that sometimes that means that your prices that you're charging your customers have to be pushed higher. Because one thing I do feel is that eating out is still, across the country in general, it's too cheap. You know, if you want to go out and you want to occupy the times of lots of trained chefs and front of house people, and you want to sit in a lovely building, and you want the fire gang, and you want great food and so on and so forth, you've got to pay for that. You've got to understand that there are costs involved in it, in the same way that there are costs involved when you have your car service. Now, people will say, well, that means it's going to be really difficult to persuade the customers to come out if they've got to pay a lot more. I think that's a battle you've just got to fight by producing the best quality product you can, serving it in the best environment you can create, and delivering it with the nicest people that you can do. And if you can do that, and the customer perceives it as value for money, you can charge. I won't say you can charge whatever you like, but you can charge a sensible amount of money. That allows you to pay staff properly. And I think that's incredibly important, that our industry should not be the cheap end of the labour market. We should be able to employ people at all the different levels that can rent houses, that can buy cars, that can go on holiday, and they can do that with the income that they get from us. This is full-timers, obviously, not the part-timers. The other thing I would say is, certainly in the larger businesses, you have to demonstrate to your staff that you value them. You have to give them good food to eat when they're working for you. You have to give them a nice place to sit and eat at. You have to give them nice washing facilities, toilet facilities, somewhere to park their bike if they come down by bike. You have to give them Wi-Fi in their mess room if you have a mess room. But you have to make it so that those people think, gosh, this company I'm working for here values me. They think I'm okay. They spent all this money to make things good for me. And I think if you can do a combination of those things, you will get employees, you will keep employees, and you'll get employees who are happy.
And I think I would add to that both of us, that you've got both Will and Victoria and us, we are owner operators. And I firmly think that in my career, when I've worked in hospitality for owner operators, I've learned a lot. I've learned a lot more than when I've worked for a huge conglomerate, and I've done that as well. Owner operators have a passion, and our job is to feed that passion through our teams. And if we can keep doing that, the aspiration has to be an owner operator in what is the best industry that there is out there.
It's one of the few industries, of course, which you can still be an owner operator. You know, yes. Retail is much harder to do it in. You can't do it if you're designing nuclear power stations. We are one of the industries where actually you can, quite young, you know, at 25, 26, 28. Look at
Will and Victoria.
You can end up having...
I wish I was 25, 26 still.
You know, but it can be a lease, it can be a rental, it can be a private lease where you're running it for somebody that owns it themselves but doesn't want to. There's all sorts of opportunities available to you.
Yeah, it is an open pathway, although I have met some publicans who probably would say they could run a nuclear power station pretty easily.
Might be easier.
Yeah, no members of the public in them.
Yeah, absolutely.
I am going to wrap it up because we're way over time now.
Right.
Thank you again, Will, Victoria, Leslie, Bruce, Ashley. We got there in the end. Thank you also to Leslie Anderson of Hedgerow Marketing, who puts us through this pain. It's been a really good session. It's been really interesting, and I appreciate it. The next one in the series for us will be on holiday parks, and that will be at the end of March, beginning of April, for anyone who's interested in that side of the hospitality sector. So to the contributors, thanks again. Everyone who's attended today, thank you, and go safe.
Good luck, guys. Have a good season.
Thank you.
you.